At the beginning of the movie, we see a terrified man inside a moving van, repeatedly asking the people inside to stop. He apologizes to them and tells them that they don't need to go where they're headed. He begs them to stop the van so they can talk, and nervously says that he absolutely does not want to see that boy. The scene cuts to an isolated house, where we see a mysterious boy sitting in a wheelchair inside a room. The windows are covered with wooden boards, and the boy looks sick and is fast asleep. The scene then cuts back to the man in the van. He desperately starts shouting that he doesn't want to see the boy, and begins violently banging his head against the wall of the van while screaming in panic. Suddenly, the boy opens his eyes, and the scene cuts to black.
Comment. Subscribe to Recaps Horror.
We then hear the voiceover of a woman named Ellen Hirschbergen. She introduces herself and says that she is telling us everything that happened in the hope that it will never happen again. She says that her mother died in February after battling Alzheimer's disease. Before that, she had been many things. A modestly successful fashion designer, and even the author of a children's book about peas. Eventually, she became a caretaker, but now she isn't even that anymore. So, all she could do was reinvent herself and start over. Wanting a fresh start, Ellen moves to the small town of Pontiac, where she meets Father John at the local church. Since there are no permanent job openings, she offers to help out and suggests organizing a charity market to raise money for the church's damaged benches. Father John agrees to the idea. Later, Ellen is at home when she receives a call from her cousin Donna. Ellen tells her that she is enjoying the new town and its peaceful atmosphere. Donna is happy to hear that, and then brings up their cousin, Winthrop, whom Ellen used to take care of every Thursday when they were children. Donna tells her that Winthrop has been staying with them for a while. But now her husband Dan wants him to leave. She says that Winthrop has found a job at a sheet metal plant near Pontiac. Hearing this, Ellen immediately offers to let Winthrop stay with her. Donna warns Ellen about Winthrop's PTSD and strange behavior, but Ellen says she will handle it. The scene cuts to Ellen going to pick up Winthrop. After nearly 30 years, the two cousins are finally reunited. Winthrop appreciates Ellen taking him in and thanks her for helping him. As he walks toward her car, Ellen notices that he is limping. She takes him home and shows him his room, where she also shows him a childhood photo of the two of them. Winthrop strangely thanks Ellen and immediately closes the door, which she finds a little odd. Later, during lunch, they reminisce about their childhood. Winthrop remembers Ellen's mother and says that she was always cheerful and an excellent cook. Hearing this, Ellen becomes emotional and recalls the accident that killed Winthrop's parents. Afterward, Winthrop goes to take a shower, but Ellen notices that he stays in the bathroom for a very long time. Meanwhile, inside the bathroom, Winthrop is seen sitting in the bathtub with a severe injury on his leg. He carefully cleans the wound before completely submerging himself in the bathtub water. That night, Ellen wakes up after hearing strange noises. She goes to Winthrop's room to check on him and notices that their childhood photo is missing from the frame. She then sees Winthrop sleepwalking out of the house. Ellen follows him outside and sees him walking away into the darkness. When she calls his name, he turns around. But just then, Ellen steps on something sharp. As her attention is distracted by the pain, Winthrop suddenly disappears. However, when Ellen goes back inside, he mysteriously appears again and runs away. The next morning, Ellen asks Winthrop if he remembers their Uncle Ray, his father's younger brother. But the moment she mentions his name, Winthrop immediately says that he doesn't want to talk about him. He adds that he finds it difficult to understand what people do to one another. Ellen assures him that he doesn't have to think about any of that while he is here. Later, Ellen tells Father John about Winthrop's struggles with PTSD. He barely sleeps, walks around at night, locks himself in the bathroom for hours, and avoids eye contact. She worries that she isn't capable of helping him, but Father John reassures her that she is already doing a lot for him. He also reminds her that, just as she did her best for her mother, she is now doing the same for Winthrop. Sometime later, Ellen is gardening in her backyard, with Winthrop helping her. Just as Ellen turns around, she is startled to see a woman standing outside the garden. The woman introduces herself as Vanna, Ellen's neighbor. Vanna is surprised by how much Ellen has transformed the garden in such a short time. She tells Ellen that she has been living in the area for about a year, but the neighborhood is so quiet that there is almost nothing to do there. During their conversation, Vanna keeps glancing at Winthrop. She reveals that she originally moved there to study poetry at Genesee College, where she became involved with her professor, Grace. However, Grace eventually used and abandoned her. Feeling betrayed, Vana says she is now trying to find Grace. She then asks Ellen if Winthrop is her husband, but Ellen clarifies that he is actually her cousin. Vana offers to help Ellen with the gardening, but despite Ellen's refusal, she walks into the house and starts looking around. Suddenly, she asks how long ago Ellen's mother passed away. Ellen is surprised by how Vana knows about her mother, but Vana explains that she saw her photograph inside. Ellen tells her that her mother passed away only a few months ago. Ellen then notices Vana pulling out a fingernail and asks if it doesn't hurt. Vana coldly replies, "Everything hurts." That evening, while Ellen is cooking dinner, she suddenly notices Vana's reflection in the oven glass moving toward her, startling her, even though Vana is actually sitting at the dining table waiting for dinner. Ellen calls Winthrop and introduces him to Vana. Winthrop looks uncomfortable around her, and Vana jokingly asks why he is staying with his sister and whether he doesn't have a job. Ellen explains that his job has already been arranged and will start soon. Vana then jokingly asks if Winthrop is unable to speak. Irritated but calm, Winthrop replies that he can speak. Vana immediately apologizes, saying she didn't mean to make fun of him. When Ellen walks Vana outside after dinner, Vana asks how long Winthrop has been staying with her. Ellen says it hasn't been long, but Vana warns her to be careful, claiming she can tell that Winthrop has done some terrible things. She then leaves on her bicycle. Later, when Ellen opens the bathroom door, she finds Winthrop standing there and notices the severe injury covering his leg. Winthrop immediately shuts the door in her face. We then see Winthrop's mouth suddenly stretch unnaturally wide without making a sound. The next morning, Ellen gives Winthrop some coffee and apologizes for what happened the previous night. Winthrop explains that his leg was burned in an accident in the kitchen of the military mess hall. There were huge vats of frying oil, and some soldiers were fooling around when one of them accidentally knocked one over, nearly killing him. Later, Ellen notices that Winthrop has repaired her bird bath. She thanks him and hugs him, telling him that she wishes they had taken him in after his parents died. She also apologizes for not being there for him back then. Just then, Vana arrives with some items to donate to the charity market at the church. She also brings a bottle of alcohol, hoping to spend some time with Ellen. During their conversation, Vana reveals a painful secret from her childhood. She tells Ellen that her father mistreated her and exposed her to further abuse. Ellen tries to comfort her and tells her that she is incredibly brave. Vana says that she feels trapped in her own body and desperately wishes she could have a new one because she feels pain everywhere. Just then, Winthrop walks in, and he immediately becomes uncomfortable when he sees Vana. She approaches him, and Winthrop asks what she wants from him, and Vana whispers, "Everything." Ellen steps in to defuse the situation, and Winthrop leaves for his room. Afterward, Vana warns Ellen not to trust him. She even claims that Winthrop has inappropriate intentions toward both of them, but Ellen ignores her comment. Vana then asks Ellen to dance with her. Reluctantly, Ellen joins her. Vana tells Ellen that she puts up a very puritanical front and suggests that she must have some secrets of her own. Ellen insists that she doesn't have any secrets, but Vana continues staring at her in an unsettling way. Feeling uncomfortable, Ellen says it's getting late and that Vana should go home. However, Vana uses the heavy rain and her drunkenness as an excuse to stay the night. Unable to refuse, Ellen lets her stay. Later that night, both women are sleeping in the same bed. After some time, Vana suddenly places her hand on Ellen's stomach and grabs her, making Ellen uncomfortable. Ellen gets up and notices that Vana appears to be asleep. She cautiously moves closer to check on her, but Vana suddenly opens her eyes, startling Ellen, before going back to sleep. Ellen then goes to the bathroom and takes out a heater. When she hears a noise outside, she goes to investigate, and we notice an entity behind the shower curtain. Looking through the window, Ellen sees Winthrop sleepwalking again and leaving the house. Ellen takes the heater back toward her room, but we find Vana standing behind the locked door, waiting for her. Deciding not to return to the bedroom, Ellen takes the heater and settles down on the couch in the living room instead. The next morning, Vana comes out of the room and tells Ellen that she is going to borrow the heater for a couple of days. Ellen tells her that the heater is meant for Winthrop's room, but Vana takes it anyway and leaves. One night, Ellen wakes up after hearing a door open. Looking through the window, she sees Winthrop sleepwalking out of the house again. This time, Vana also notices him and calls him over to her house. When Winthrop enters, he finds Vana sitting on a chair and crying. As he approaches her, she reaches out, suddenly grabs his hand, and hugs him. Through her tears, she tells him that she knows what his Uncle Ray did to him. She says that Ray kept him locked in a cage when he was a child, and was the one who ruined his life. Winthrop is shocked. and wonders how Vana could possibly know all of this. Suddenly, he gets a vision of the day his parents died in the accident. He asks Vana who she really is, but before she can answer, he leaves her house. The movie then jumps 3 days ahead. Ellen enters Winthrop's room with some food, as he hasn't left his room for 3 days. She tells him that she is taking him to the doctor the next day. She then says that she is going to get the heater back from Vana because the weather has become extremely cold. However, when Ellen arrives at Vana's house, she finds the door open and the place completely silent. No one answers from inside, and there is a terrible smell coming from the house. Moments later, she makes a horrifying discovery. Vana is dead. Ellen immediately calls the police, and an investigation begins. Detective Tom introduces himself and questions Ellen before eventually allowing her to leave. Back home, Ellen tells Winthrop that Vana has been killed and appears to have been brutally beaten. Winthrop is shocked and can't understand why anyone would want to kill Vana. The next day, Detective Tom visits Ellen's house. Since she discovered the body, the police conduct a routine search of the property. During the search, Tom asks about the heater Vana had borrowed and shows Ellen a picture of it. Ellen confirms that it is the same heater. He then notices Winthrop in the garden and asks who he is. Ellen explains that he is her cousin, Winthrop. Tom asks whether Winthrop knew Vana, and Ellen says that Vana had visited their house several times, shared meals with them, and even spent one night there because of the heavy rain. Tom then takes down Winthrop's full name and asks where he was on the night of the murder. Ellen confidently replies that Winthrop is always at home. Before leaving, Tom tells Ellen that Winthrop must come to the police station the following morning because they have a few questions for him as well. The next day, Detective Tom interrogates Winthrop and questions him about the night of Vana's murder. He brings up Winthrop's PTSD and sleepwalking, then shows him his military file, revealing an incident where Winthrop severely injured a superior officer. However, Tom also reveals that he served in Kuwait and understands the psychological scars of war. He assures Winthrop that he simply wants the truth. Tom then shows him photos of his leg injury and asks about it. When Winthrop remains silent, Tom asks whether he ever went to Vana's house without Ellen. Winthrop firmly denies it. Tom then shows him a mitt, explaining that its matching pair was found in Vana's kitchen, while the other was discovered in Winthrop's room. Based on this evidence, the police become convinced that Winthrop is the killer and arrest him. Ellen tries to explain that the mitt came from a donation bag Vana had brought for the church charity market, but the public defender tells her that she can provide those details during the investigation. Determined to help Winthrop, Ellen meets with a lawyer named Nina and explains that Vana had brought over a bag of items for the fundraiser, including the mitt, although there was only one. Nina warns that the prosecution will likely focus on Winthrop's late-night sleepwalking. However, she has found an expert willing to submit an affidavit explaining how PTSD can affect sleep and cause nighttime disturbances. Ellen insists that although Winthrop is clearly struggling with psychological issues, he is not capable of murder. She also tells Nina that she felt something was wrong with Vana from the moment they first met. Nina reassures her that she has already hired someone to investigate Vana's past. Meanwhile, in prison, Winthrop is seen looking lost and repeatedly muttering, "Porta John man." Just then, a guard comes to give Winthrop his food. Suddenly, Winthrop brutally attacks and kills him, completely losing control in a fit of rage. However, moments later, he realizes that the entire incident was just a hallucination. Later, Ellen arrives to visit him. Winthrop tells her that he doesn't feel right and has been seeing strange things, brief flashes of violent incidents. He feels as though he is seeing the world through someone else's eyes and that someone else's thoughts are running through his mind. Ellen asks him if he had anything to do with Vana's death, but he firmly denies it. Ellen assures him that she will get him out of prison, but Winthrop says that he doesn't want to leave and doesn't want her to visit him again, which shocks Ellen. Later that night, Ellen tries to find information about Vana online, but is unable to find anything. Determined to uncover the truth, she secretly goes to Vana's house. As she enters, she starts looking around, but soon, strange and eerie noises begin coming from inside the house. She moves forward cautiously. Suddenly, Ellen looks into the mirror and feels as though her reflection has turned into Vana, which startles her. She moves forward and finds an envelope containing a note written by Vana. It says, "I will let you sleep for 10 hours and paint a rainbow on you. Then I will slice you open so your heart falls out before you wake up. The first thing you will see is me rubbing your heart's blood on my face." Ellen takes the note to Nina and tells her that she found it in Vana's house. Around the same time, the lawyer tells her that they have uncovered some disturbing information about Vanna's past. She explains that Vanna had been living under several fake names and identities in different cities. In Salt Lake City, she invited 2 young men who were visiting the area as religious missionaries into her home, held them captive for several hours, and sexually assaulted them. The lawyer says that the police eventually arrested Vanna, but she escaped before she could be brought to court. She later assumed a new identity and moved to Pontiac. Nina believes that Vanna was mentally unstable and that there could have been several people who wanted revenge against her. She then warns Ellen not to go back to Vanna's house. That night, while Ellen is cleaning Winthrop's bed, she finds Vanna's nail on it. This makes her wonder if Winthrop really was responsible for Vanna's death after all. The next day, on the day of the hearing, after reviewing Nina's evidence and all the available proof, the prosecution requests a 2-week delay so they can gather more evidence. That night, Tom drops Winthrop off at home and tells him that he may think he has gotten away with everything, but both of them know the truth. Winthrop gives him an eerie smile before getting out of the car, while Ellen takes him inside. Once they enter the house, Winthrop suddenly asks Ellen if he can sleep with her that night. Ellen gently tells him that he should get some rest in his own room instead. Later, when she returns to her room, she notices through the locked door that Winthrop is standing outside. After a while, he quietly walks away. The next morning, Ellen finds a note from Winthrop at her door. In it, he says that perhaps it would be better for Ellen if he moved somewhere else. Days pass, and there is no sign of Winthrop. Then, one late night, Ellen receives a call from Nina. She tells her that they have found Winthrop and that he has moved into a homeless shelter. She then sends Ellen the address. In the next scene, Ellen visits Winthrop at the shelter and tries to talk to him. However, his voice has almost completely disappeared. Instead, he writes down that he no longer wants to go back home. Ellen gives him some money and tells him to get some rest. Suddenly, Winthrop writes something on a piece of paper. Where does Grace Beck live? Ellen tells him that she doesn't know who that is. Winthrop emphasizes the name and writes again that he needs Grace. Ellen asks who Grace is, and Winthrop writes down that she is a teacher. He then struggles to speak and asks, where does Grace Beck live? Ellen tells him that she will find out. After a few days, Ellen receives some information about Grace through Nina's informant. She then sends Grace an email explaining that her cousin Winthrop has been falsely accused of murdering Vanna. She tells Grace that she is contacting her at Winthrop's request and asks her to call the number mentioned in the email. However, the moment Grace sees Vanna's name, she becomes frightened. A few days later, Ellen returns to the shelter to meet Winthrop, but she learns that he hasn't been there for the past week. One of the shelter workers tells her that he might be staying among the tents underneath the Covington overpass. Ellen goes there to look for him. Among the many people living there, she eventually spots Winthrop disguised as a woman. Shocked, Ellen confronts him, but Winthrop tells her to stay back. He asks if she found Grace Beck. When Ellen says yes, he angrily demands to know where she is, and even threatens to hurt Ellen. Ellen tells him that she knows this isn't really him, and that she wants to help him, but Winthrop shouts that only Grace can help him. He then orders Ellen to bring Grace to him. Frightened, Ellen leaves and returns home, where she immediately calls Grace. Grace tells her that when she learned the man accused of murdering Vanna was looking for her, all her old fears came rushing back. She adds that she is glad Vanna is dead. Grace then explains that Vanna was once a student in her poetry class. She says, I was going through a difficult period in my life, and Vanna played on my vulnerability like a maestro. Their relationship quickly became intense, involving drugs and domination. Grace eventually realized that Vanna had become obsessed with what Grace allowed her to do to her. She says that Vanna liked to hang her. Grace wanted to escape, but Vanna became furious and told her that she would never be free of her. That's when Vanna told Grace about the Porta John man. According to Grace, this man told Vanna that she no longer had to be afraid because she would now live forever. Vanna then swore that if Grace ever left her, she would do whatever it took to find her. Grace tells Ellen that she is changing her number. Ellen then tells her that she found some letters, including some addressed to Grace. Suddenly, Grace becomes frightened and says, Vanna is not dead. She advises Ellen to leave her home immediately, make sure she leaves no trace, and then abruptly ends the call. Just then, Ellen hears a strange noise. Suddenly, someone begins pounding violently on her front door, startling her. She then hears footsteps running across the roof of her house, and then spots someone. Terrified, she rushes outside, and at that exact moment, Winthrop jumps from the roof and lunges at her, asking in a demonic voice, "Where is Grace Beck?" Suddenly, several men appear and come to Ellen's aid. They tranquilize Winthrop, place him inside a van, and drive away. Unaware of who these people are, Ellen immediately follows them in her car. After driving for some time, the van stops in front of the same isolated house we saw at the beginning of the movie. The men take Winthrop inside. Ellen gets out of her car and demands to know who they are and what they are doing with Winthrop. The men tell her to come inside as well. One of them introduces himself as James and introduces his companion, Kevin. As Ellen enters the house, James reveals that he is a priest. He then introduces her to Father Caldwell and a doctor named Emily Warren. James asks Ellen to sit down, saying that they are going to tell her everything. They then reveal a shocking truth. Father Caldwell explains that Winthrop isn't suffering from a mental illness. He is actually possessed by a real demon. He explains that an entity had been inside Vana for a very long time and has now taken up residence in Winthrop. Vana was possessed at a very young age. The evil presence inside her twisted her desires and eventually became obsessed with Grace Beck. Fortunately, Grace somehow managed to escape from Vana, and that's when they lost track of her. When Ellen asks how, they explain that the evil entity seeks out people who have been weakened by abuse, neglect, or drugs, like Vana and Winthrop. Such trauma can alter the brain's pathways, making it more vulnerable and allowing possession to take hold. However, in very rare cases, the brain can form a kind of neural cage that prevents an entity from escaping. James then shows Ellen an ancient book that refers to such a person as a lockbox. He explains that the only way to save Winthrop now is to transfer the powerful entity inside him into another host, one that the demon cannot escape from, a lockbox. Ellen finally understands why Winthrop told her that he felt as though someone else's thoughts were running through his mind. James then introduces her to the same mysterious boy in a wheelchair whom we saw at the beginning of the movie. Father Caldwell explains that the boy had been in a coma at St. Mary's for almost a year. His brain scans showed that he possessed this neural cage, so he was brought to them. They believe he might be the only one capable of saving Winthrop. Ellen is shocked to hear this. Father Caldwell then explains that the boy is more than just a child. He has the ability to absorb pain like water into sand. James explains that the boy was born to parents whose cruelty was matched only by their neglect. They drugged him and eventually abandoned him. So now James and the others do their best to take care of him. However, James believes that this boy was built for this purpose. The following morning, preparations for the ritual begin. They shave the boy's head and draw symbols on his back, preparing him for the ritual, which is scheduled to begin at sunset. Ellen notices that the boy's nose is bleeding and immediately begins cleaning the blood. But at that exact moment, the boy bends his head backwards and opens his mouth unnaturally. The demons inside him take control of his body and begin speaking to Ellen through him. Terrified, Ellen asks why they are there. The demons warn her that if the ritual takes place, Winthrop will die. Moments later, the possession ends, and the boy returns to his normal state. Ellen immediately goes to James and tells him that the demons inside the boy warned her that continuing the ritual would kill Winthrop. James is shocked that the demons spoke directly to her, but he tells Ellen that the entity is simply trying to manipulate her by lying. Ellen then asks if the ritual is always successful. James admits that there is always a chance that something could go wrong. When Ellen asks how many people they have lost during previous rituals, he reveals that out of 8 attempts, 2 people died. Even so, he insists that this is their only remaining chance to save Winthrop. In the end, James leaves the decision entirely up to Ellen. He tells her that if she wants to leave with Winthrop, she is free to do so. Ellen firmly tells him that Winthrop will not die tonight. The scene then cuts to Winthrop lying on a bed in a room, while Ellen sleeps in a chair beside him. Suddenly, she has a dream that reveals what really happened on the night Winthrop went to Vana's house. As Winthrop tries to leave the house, the door suddenly slams shut on its own. Vana then pins him against the wall. Winthrop struggles to fight back, and at that moment, Vana tells him that she has something for him, and that he will get to keep it. Vana then opens her mouth unnaturally. Her eyes turn milky white, and the transition begins. The demon leaves Vana's body and enters Winthrop. Under the demon's control, Winthrop brutally attacks and kills Vana. Afterward, he removes one of Vana's eyeballs and places his own eye over her hollow eye. Back in the present, Ellen suddenly jolts awake and looks at Winthrop. Without warning, Winthrop screams at her in his possessed form, startling her. Just then, James and Kevin arrive and restrain him. They take him down to the basement, where they secure him to a chair in front of the comatose boy as the ritual begins. Cameras have been installed throughout the room to document the procedure. After some time, the boy begins to become possessed. and the screens start flickering. Seeing the boy, Winthrop becomes terrified and desperately pleads for help. Moments later, he also begins to become possessed. And suddenly, all the screens go blank.
What just happened?
Ellen asks what happened, and James explains that no camera has ever been able to record that exact moment. Suddenly, terrifying screams and demonic voices echo throughout the basement. Ellen hears Winthrop desperately pleading for help as the demonic voices grow louder and more intense. Just then, James and the others realize that Ellen is no longer with them. Ellen has gone down into the basement to check on Winthrop. She cautiously moves forward and sees a horrifying demonic creature that appears to be a twisted combination of Winthrop and the comatose boy. Terrified, Ellen begins backing away, but the creature suddenly charges at her. Just as it reaches her, it disappears, and Ellen is thrown backward with tremendous force. Ellen gets back on her feet and leaves the basement. As she looks around the house, she notices a woman standing in a room upstairs. The entire house is strangely silent, and there is no sign of anyone else. Ellen goes upstairs and sees an old woman walking out of a room. She recognizes her as her mother, and her mother starts moving toward her, but she suddenly disappears. A short while later, the woman appears again. Ellen tells her, "You are not my mom." The woman then claims that she is Winthrop, and begins taking the forms of Ellen's mother and Winthrop in an attempt to psychologically break her. The demon tells Ellen that she knew where Winthrop was going, to his sick, sadistic uncle, who would beat him until he could no longer cry. Ellen insists that she didn't know. The demon tells her, "Don't lie to me again. You did know." Ellen finally admits that she did, but says, "Yes, but I know who I owe, and you are not him." The demon then suddenly disappears from in front of her. Ellen is relieved, believing that she has defeated it. However, moments later, the comatose boy appears upstairs. Ellen thanks him for saving Winthrop and hugs him, but she soon realizes that it is actually the demon. The boy suddenly attacks her, and an intense struggle breaks out between them. Ellen eventually manages to overpower him, but then realizes that none of what she was experiencing was real. She suddenly finds herself back in the basement. She finds that Winthrop and the boy are still tied up in their respective positions. Just then, James and the others knock on the basement door. The boy tells Ellen that her interference interrupted the ritual, preventing the demon from completely transferring from one body to another. Winthrop insists that the boy is lying. Confused and unable to determine where the demon actually is, Ellen closes her eyes and prays to God to show her the right path. That's when she realizes the horrifying truth. The demon has entered her own body. Her mouth stretches unnaturally, and her eyes turn milky white. The boy immediately tells Ellen to touch his hand, but the demon desperately warns her not to do it. Ignoring the demon, Ellen reaches toward the boy's hand as the entity desperately tries to stop her. We then see glimpses of the demon manipulating everything around her. The struggle becomes so intense that Ellen's fingernails are torn off, and the skin on her hand begins to tear. The demon does everything it can to prevent her from touching the boy's hand. But at the very last moment, Ellen manages to grab the boy's hand. The demon is immediately forced out of Ellen's body and becomes permanently trapped inside the boy. At that exact moment, James and the others break down the basement door and rush inside. After examining them, the doctor confirms that the ritual has succeeded. The demon is now permanently trapped inside the Lockbox boy, while Ellen and Winthrop are finally free from its control. The scene then cuts to Father Caldwell asking Ellen what happened in the basement. She tells him that the demon tried to pull her apart. James then approaches her and asks her to record her entire experience on a voice recorder, so they can use it the next time they attempt to save someone. Ellen happily agrees, and thanks James. Later, Ellen goes to speak with Winthrop. He tells her that the demon was trying to destroy the last good memory he had. He then thanks Ellen for saving his life. A few days later, Ellen receives a gift and a letter from Winthrop. In the letter, he writes, "Dear Cousin Ellen, I saw this figurine of Michael the Archangel vanquishing the demon, and it reminded me of you." He also tells her that he has found a new job and is really enjoying the work. He invites her to visit him someday. And with that, the movie comes to an end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.